welcome back to Talk of the Town. I'm Kim Piazza.
And I'm Phil Arno.
And we are here still with our distinguished panel of guests. And we're having really kind of a, I don't want to say a heated discussion, but
Not yet.
we're certainly approaching a topic.
It's not over yet.
It's not over yet? Good, good. I want to see some fireworks, Reverend.
The sidebars are as interesting as the...
I'm glad we have the chief of police here to kind of keep us, you know. But well, let's continue with kind of the path we were on before we went on break. And while we were on break, I know Phil was mentioning that this race relations conversation has gone on for years, but we're not finding solutions. And is that because we're not talking about solutions? We're only talking about the race relation issue. And I know what I think about that, but I want to hear what the panel thinks about that. And I'd love to start with the chief.
Yeah, we've been seeking solutions for decades. There's no question. To say that there's been no success is totally false. For example, in the town of Cheektowaga, since 2009, we've reduced use of force by 50%, which is extremely important.
That's something to be so proud of, I think.
And we certainly are. We've done a better job with recruitment. We've done a better job of weeding out undesirable candidates, but also we've done a very good job with discipline. When we found someone that we didn't feel met the standard, we've been very aggressive at removing those people from service. We are constantly image conscious. We're not always successful. There will always be complaints. Where you have a police officer, you will have complaints. I mean, it's just the nature of the business. But I think we've been very diligent with that. As Reverend Pridgeon is well aware, there was a horrible image problem with the town of Cheektowaga and the town of Cheektowaga police decades ago.
Yep.
That still exists, not nearly to the level that it did, but there will always be people who have a vested interest in keeping that perception alive. We work every day, our officers do, to make sure that our department is being perceived in a positive light. We are not always successful, but it is something we work on all the time.
And people are flawed. People make mistakes. People are flawed. And Paul Cambria, just before we came back, you mentioned something about excuses.
Well, I think what happens is, first of all, I think things have improved because the police do treat people better. And we have to, you know, that's the first part. A little respect is great. On the other hand, we have some people who use their race as an excuse for their conduct. And no matter what they do, and I've had this happen when they've come in and say, oh, well, you know, he picked on me because I'm black. Well, he picked on you because you went in that store and broke the window and stole something. I mean, and we get that kind of thing. So now, how do you deal with that? Well, the police, if they step up and start treating some of the people that they encounter with respect and equality and all that, the individuals, what do you do with that? Well, parents have to play a role, schools have to play a role, reverends and so on, where the children may congregate in churches and that play a role, and have them take responsibility for their actions, be
that might be the
proud of
ultimate
themselves
solution.
and so on.
The
It's a long
solution is a cultural solution.
That may be the ultimate
that's
solution,
a slow process.
But there are systemic racial issues that exist that you can legitimately say, is it because I'm black? There was a study done where there were 4 resumes, identical resumes, 4 identical resumes sent out to companies all over the country. These 4 resumes, the same resume, the same companies. The difference on these resumes were the names. So you had Brittany and Sam versus Lakeisha and Taiwan. The kids' names, with the white kids' names, they got called. They had twice as many, you know, calls to come in for interviews from the same companies with the same exact resume.
Anybody who acts as if racism does not still exist is fooling themselves. It's here. It is still prevalent. it is even more hidden at times, and so which means it is much more difficult to really see or measure. But let me say, I think that when we talk about looking at how we do things a little different, and Chief Zach just said it, you have to look at facts and statistics. I think that's so important. No one changes a system simply by emotion. Emotion might be a catalyst, but it will not solve it. There has to be some research. Buffalo Common Council, for instance, we asked for some statistics, because if people are saying, we think that blacks are treated differently than whites, is that emotional? I think it starts there, but then let's get to the facts. Is that the fact? And if that is the fact, just as Chief just said, when you look at the reduction, he talked about numbers, the reduction of force, right? So you had to look at numbers. When we put that forward, there were some people who said, why do you want to look at the numbers? Why do you want to look? You're pointing at police. No, how do you change a system? At the end of the day, it might be just as many white young men stopped as it is black young men. But if you never have a measurement, how do you change something you can't measure? And then how do you come back later? What 2 years we say it's better? Why? Because there were no protests? I don't think you would see the number of protests you see now had there not been multiple events. So you had an event, you had an event in Ferguson, you had another event that involved, and so then, of course, the emotion comes out and says, so that there's a problem.
Well, and not only that, you have cell phone cameras that are recapturing the events. And so now they're being exposed.
Yeah.
And then that sets off a whole media thing. But the fix is, there's a lot of components to the fix. There's no one magic bullet here. I mean, there are a lot of components to it.
I see the
from
chief chomping at the
treatment
bit
to education
to talk
attitude.
about that cell phone component. The chief is chomping at the bit to talk about what you
the cell
just
phone
commented
part.
on.
Yeah.
I want to hear this.
When you talk about the legitimacy of police work, today in America, when you take into account what Paul just said, virtually everyone over the age of 10 has a cell phone which contains an audio and digital recording device. When you take into account dashboard cams, body cameras on police officers, cameras in public spaces, all through the mall that we're in here today, cameras everywhere. Okay, there is more police citizen footage that has ever existed at any time in American history. You're seeing more police and citizen
And that's a good thing?
interaction.
That's a good thing?
Of course it is.
Both.
But the
It's
problem is, what the problem is, you're talking about millions and millions of police citizen contacts that are taking place each and every day, each and every year.
Where
And
there's
what
no
gets the
problem.
attention?
But you've got 100 viral videos. Why aren't there thousands? They're not. And what we're seeing, especially with the media, is this exploitation of cops behaving badly and somehow tying it in to an entire profession, when in fact there's miles and miles of footage of police doing their job responsibly, but it's these viral videos that are out there that are shaping the
They're
narrative
garnering
of how
attention.
policing is done in the United
Just to put it in
States.
perspective a little bit, as one who has been in the media for my entire adult life, I know the nature of newspapers, TV. If they have a story that's unusual or sensational, they gain. They gain viewers, they gain readers. That's what they want to push. If I'm a pilot, if an airplane goes down in the field and 2 people walk away, that's still going to be the lead story on the news every night. Even though nobody got hurt, maybe 3 people were killed on the highway during the course of the same time period, that plane crash is still going to take precedent.
Absolutely.
Same thing with race relations and riots and a police officer who's behaving badly. That's something they can latch onto and sensationalize. And there's follow-up to it. There's a lot of, here's some footage that I shot in LA. And this is footage that was very interesting because the councilwoman, Maxine Waters, her office got a call saying police were using excessive force. They were there to arrest a murder suspect. And it was a black victim and a black suspect. They came in and there was emotion running very high in the neighborhood and they didn't want the police in there for anything. So there was a disturbance, more police were called, and the police had to calm everything down and they arrested a couple of people. In the aftermath, Maxine Waters and her staff looked at that tape and said, see, that's excessive force. And then we had a police representative from the LAPD on, and he looked and he said, no, these people were being disruptive. They had to be controlled. We had to control the situation.
Is it part of the problem? That's a great example of part of the problem.
Absolutely.
Context. The media is taking a piece of something out of context, and both sides are watching it, and the world should be about context.
Well, but that's never going to change. So you have to come up with a solution that deals with it.
One of the solutions.
The government can't come in and say, hey, don't play this, don't play that. Now you have First Amendment problems.
Absolutely.
Well, I say now you
I
have a
think
First
sometimes
Amendment.
we're afraid to tell each other, just, you know, it's not because of your race or your color, it's because you're an idiot. You know?
Can I grab that word?
Please.
Because of the fact, as I was sitting here thinking, it is so important that we can, I think, that we talk about culture change. And you'll never have culture change if each culture thinks they're perfect. Let me start there. I am a government representative for the city of Buffalo. I am the first to say that I believe that we have some individual bad police officers and that they don't need to be police officers, they need to find another job. That doesn't indict the whole force. Now there might be you and say, you just said, if it's wrong, it's wrong. If you have a guy who walks up to an innocent person and punches them in the face and he's got a badge, it's wrong. I don't care who you are, right? So I think if you don't say it on that side, but then I'm an African American. Now let me say for me, there are neighborhoods I don't want to go in because there is a culture in that neighborhood of violence. There's a culture and there is crime. There's a culture against police. So if the cultures that need to work together do not both say we have some problems, this is why I was so excited to work with the ministers in Buffalo, because when I met with them, I said, if this is going to be we're going to attack the police, I can't work with you. When they said, we're going to Niagara Falls and talk to young people about how to deal, and they brought attorneys like this guy. They didn't bring him, but they brought attorneys that look like those kids and said to those kids, when you're stopped by the police, this is how you act. You got to understand that a lot of the folks who are being stopped by the police who are complaining some of them, let me not frame it, some of them come from cultures in which the police are talked about negatively at home. At home, it starts at home. So if we don't outward say that and say that there are problems in cultures that need to change, I think we just keep going. It's his fault. It's his fault. It's his fault.
There's so many pieces to the fix. There isn't one piece.
Absolutely.
It has to be home, it has to be in the school, your business, your workplace, and it's got to be all of it.
Yeah, there's so many places to start.
That points to education then, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you can't.
It's education, and it's education, it comes on two levels. It's the grassroots level from your position as someone who has influence in the community. It's also the leaders on a national scale who have to be the voice of reason when something goes down. They have to say, look, there are bad people in this world, and there are bad things that happen.
But it's also admitting racism exists.
We can't overreact so that two officers get murdered in a police car as a result of the rhetoric or the
but you have to then take the Sharptons and say that's what they're doing.
I'm going to call Sharpton for Paul. I'm going to call and have him come over here so that he can tell him.
But that's the problem. You see, you think you're making some progress, and then a guy like that comes out and goes,
but it's on the other side too, Paul.
For reasons that have nothing to do with
it. It's not just Sharpton. Yeah. No, come on. It's not just this one black guy.
He's an example.
Because there are white guys on the other side. No, definitely not defending Sharpton.
You don't want to defend Sharpton?
Look, I'm not the attorney.
Why can't you defend Sharpton?
But there are people on both sides, whether it's a Sharpton or whether it's some skinhead.
I can't help it. When I see that guy show up, and all of a sudden, you know, you're supposed to have a protest.
We need to move to a commercial break, and we're going to let these two box it out over that commercial break.
Protesters, people running out.
We're going to sit here quiet.
With
television.
You got handcuffs?
Handcuffs.
I just, when you see